I started first off with a little email service, just friends and family, showing different charts and setups. And I really got into technical analysis and learning the principles of what technical analysis was and how I can utilize it, not as a predictor, but as a tool and have some sort of an edge that I might not get with traditional investing. It's a tool to help you better manage risk, to find better entries. When it comes to strategy, position sizing, all price patterns to some extent, they all move between periods of contraction and expansion. Things get tight, people forget about it. Things explode, get a lot of tension.
Welcome everyone. We are going to talk technical analysis again. Today I have Michael Silva from a YouTube channel called Figuring Out Money. We're going to chat about technicals, fundamentals, his philosophy. We're going to look at technicals for the cannabis ETF, MSOS. We're going to look at technicals for Aduro Clean Technologies because many of you want to know. So, Michael, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Give us your background, who you are, how you started YouTube. Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I've been trading for, roughly 10 to 15 years, but you know how it goes at the first start of it. There's a lot of learning, a lot of adaptation to all of that.
Prior to losing, right? A lot of money losing.
Yeah, you money losing. Surprisingly enough, though, if you do start out early, right, you want to start out with a smaller amount. So the money that you lose, hopefully, is not life changing for you, which
you can make it up within 2 weeks of working and saving. Right?
There you go. Prior to really just going full-time trading and then doing YouTube, I was working in the communication industry for a Fortune 20 company for about 13 years. For basically my entire adult life, I was within the communications industry. And then when I transitioned, which was probably about 6 years ago, I started first off with a little email service, just friends and family, showing different charts and setups. And I really got into technical analysis and learning the principles of what technical analysis was and how I can utilize it, not as a predictor, but as a tool to help benefit me and have some sort of an edge that I might not get with traditional investing. So that's how I started. And then there's really three buckets so people understand a little bit more context with me. There's three buckets that I kind of fall within. There's a day trading bucket, there's a swing trading bucket, and there's more of an investing bucket. And all those are treated a little bit differently when it comes to strategy, position sizing, and so forth. So,
okay, so to a fifth grader, explain how technical analysis works and why people should care.
To a fifth grader, I'm trying to think like my son's almost 2, and I'm trying to think of how I would just talk to like a little 2-year-old about this. So I think
I don't mean 2-year-old. I know. Grader.
I know. Gotcha. I'll just try to think very, very simplistic terms here. Technical analysis is a way to measure where prices been and forecast potentially where it may go. And there's some principles within technical analysis that you kind of have to abide by. Where people get it mixed up, because a lot of people will say the common hater of technical analysis, which is funny, is like what's the common thing that they say? It's astrology or something like that, right? It's something about astrology. Well,
yeah, looking at the stars, drawing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, price is incredibly important to watch for, and some of these principles in technical analysis is something like strong stocks typically get stronger. Weak stocks typically get weaker, right? So trend following. Contraction always leads to expansion. And you can see this time and again within price. And then if you break it even further, people get really, really into the depths and the weaves of certain names like the cup with handle, the bull flag, and all these names. But really what it comes down to, all price patterns to some extent, they all move between periods of contraction and expansion. Things get tight, people forget about it. Things explode, get a lot of attention, right? Which some of these names that we can bring up might have that era already, which is bringing more eyes and so forth. So I think I went off a little tangent.
I tell you what, when I make a video about a stock, and when the stock is moving, it's up, people will watch the video.
There you go. And and when I talk about a stock that might move, nobody watches it.
No. Might is no. Moving, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how it is. So I think I went off a little bit of a tangent and probably a little bit over a fifth grader head, but hopefully that made a little bit of sense there for
Okay,
the viewers.
so now I know that technical analysis is more useful for larger cap companies, companies with a lot of volume, more volume. And so I wanted to ask you this because I focus a lot on the microcap stocks, which don't trade a lot. And people like to, set like stop losses. And for the smaller names, it doesn't make as much sense because you're going to get shaken out of your position every day because they move so much. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so I mean, primarily, I don't get into the microcap space all too much. If I were to be getting into it, there's probably a lot of volume where the bid-ask spreads are pretty tight. So basically, I'm assuming that most of your viewers know that there's a bid and ask, and there's a spread to that. And for me personally, I usually trade within the realm of tighter spreads where there's volume already traded. So, I could comment on that to an extent, but I don't feel like it would be fair because I'd be speaking from a place that I don't really specialize in, if that makes sense.
Okay. And because you said you have 3 different buckets. So if you do invest, do you at the same time utilize technical analysis while you're investing?
Not quite to the extent of swing trading and day trading, no. So investing for me is pretty quiet and calm. There's a lot of dollar cost averaging in it and just constant adding to it. It's a longer term thing. I'm looking out 30 plus years. I'm not going to mess with my son's fund. I'm not going to mess with my wife's. I'm not really getting into the depths and weaves. But if there's like an interesting name, I might like put in 1% of my portfolio into a specific individual smaller name that might have some potential. But the bulk of the investing bucket for me, which in my frame of context is 10, 20, 30 years, that's my longer term stuff. I'm looking at a lot more ETFs, certain funds that are managed, and then every once in a while, maybe 5 to 10% will be in an individual names, a basket of individual names, but not like my swing trading where I can go 10% into one specific name or even up to 15% at some times.
Okay. Now recently, I was wondering if you could, help us analyze cannabis ETF, MSOS, because recently there has been a lot of activity in the media about possible cannabis reform, and this cannabis ETF was really, really hot when Joe Biden was the president, because everybody thought Joe Biden and his administration were going to do something for cannabis, and they didn't. And then the ETF went down 95%, and now there's some life to it again. And I was wondering if you could look at it and tell us what you see in terms of charts.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's pull it up. I'll share the screen. Okay. So let's pull it up. You said MSOS, and that is a Advisor Shares Pure U.S. Cannabis ETF. So there's a couple ETFs, right? We have MSOS, we have MJ. Now, I don't really specifically know the holdings within this, but many times that I like to look at the individual holdings too for individual setups. But when I pull this up, right, I'm looking at a year-to-date basis right now, and I'll go out a little bit further, and there's a couple of things right out that stick to me. So price has kind of tagged the year-to-date volume weighted average price 3 times, right? So we came into here, we were rejected. We came into here, we were rejected. We came into here, and now we're holding up. And as we were approaching these areas, if you notice something very, very closely, as price was going up into these areas, we actually saw some decent volume coming up. All right, boom, and we see some decent volume. So when I look at this whole picture, and I'll get into the expansion and contraction part momentarily, but this shows me that there is demand. They're just not outweighing the sellers from a year-to-date perspective fully yet. And if you were to think of this in terms of, I know this is going to be way off, but just say there's this wall from a year-to-date perspective. There's a bare wall, right, knocking buyers down. There's 1,000 shares, right? Obviously, that's incorrect. But this little test and rejection maybe brought this down to 800. right? I'm just using rough numbers, right? Obviously making this up.
In other words, got rid of some of the sellers, right?
Exactly. And then right here, maybe this big rejection, maybe that brought it down to only 400 sellers, and then now we're coming back into it. Now it's a lot smaller. So when I look at this, the more tests that you see, the more likely it is to eventually break. Now, when that is, we don't really know, right? So this is just like I said, just from a technical perspective. So what do? Well, first and foremost, if I'm looking at this from a technical perspective, the run up was on good volume. I love that. But now I have to wait for a consolidation. Why? Because if I enter right here, right? If I can't do a full size position here, because if I enter right here and just say if it came down to the 50-day moving average or the 20-day moving average, that's a 15 or 16% loss on a single position. And for me, I mean, I could withstand that, but I would have to beta adjust my position. I couldn't go a full size swing trade position and hold it down for 16%. I would have to either one, slowly build, or wait for price to contract. So an example of contraction would be like right here. Notice how we saw volume come up and then we had 4 days of tight price action. We broke out and you'd have a tight stop over here and it played out with a good risk to reward. So in my opinion, when I look at this, right now what I'm seeing is this blow off type of little candle here. Okay, a little blow off move with a lot of volume. And now it's consolidating that on lighter volume. So I would like to see this go sideways for 6, 7, maybe even 8 trading sessions and just hold within this area and tighten up, because the tightness will occur at some point. And by doing that, if volatility expands in the direction, it allows for a tighter risk to potential much greater reward. So that's how I would kind of execute into that. Now, as far as is it bullish or bearish? It's not bearish. It's not bullish right now by any means, this ETF, because of, if you look at longer term, if you think of market structure, right, you have 4 stages. You have an accumulation phase, a markup phase, a distribution, and a decline. And within that, you also have smaller cycles. And within those smaller cycles, you have smaller cycles because all of this is very fractal. But if we zoom out and you look at a larger term picture, right, this is the weekly chart. And we're looking at a 40-week moving average, right? Stan Weinstein started with a 40-week, then he moved down to a 30-week when he created the market structure. I don't know if he exactly created, but he kind of made it really public. Same with the, I'm forgetting names here, but I believe it was Stan Weinstein. And then we have the 10-week, which is in blue. And what do you notice? Well, the shorter term time frame, it's starting to turn up. That's the blue one. I know it's kind of hard to see. So that's the blue. This is a little MACD down here, whatever. And then the 30-week is right here, and then the 40-week, which is the Godfather moving average, right? The 200-day moving average, roughly. And right now you can see they're all kind of converging. So in the longer term picture, you're going to have to deal with the volatility. You'll probably have to deal with 20% pullbacks, and maybe big shoot ups and so forth. If you go more into the fundamental aspect, like you were kind of saying, the various type of narratives that could drive this higher, you may be absolutely correct. But if you're not prepared for dealing with not being yet in a stage 2 markup, you're going to have to be able to bear, drawdowns or sideways price action for various points of time. So overall, when I look at this, I like the volume. I like how it's testing the year-to-date VWAP. I'm looking for a contraction, for price to contract, and then I might take a stable swing trade. But as far as more of an investment, I personally like to wait for the 40-week moving average to flatten out to start to turn back up.
Okay, and since you said that you like to look at some names within the ETF, so yeah. Can you pull up Glasshouse Brands?
Oh, I remember hearing about this one. That's actually a really good name, right? What was that? GLASF? Is that what that was?
Yep, Glasshouse Brands.
Yeah, I heard about this name a while. Yes, I have all these markings on my screen.
And it's all over the news right now because one of their farms was raided by ICE, and so the stock is selling off. But since this is part of that ETF, I believe, I was wondering if you could do the same on that.
Yeah,
I don't personally own this stock, but okay. I watch it.
Yeah, great call out. What's funny is the other day I was on a live stream and I was trying to remember what this name was because we were talking about some of these cannabis names, and I could not for the life of me remember what it was. And now that you brought it up or mentioned it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. I've been looking at this name. Okay, so let's pull it back up. Let's see what we got here. I'll just keep this line on. I don't remember what this was for. Okay, so I'm assuming that the news came out right at around this time, just maybe the other day. That's where kind of all this volume's kind of coming in at, or today, or maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could start from the daily perspective again, right? So first off, like you see this little trend and how price action was kind of just pulling back in, getting tight. There's really no volume. Nobody remembers it, right? But then all of a sudden, when some volume steps in, people start talking about it. Then all of a sudden, the volatility really does expand. So from just a point of expansion and contraction, we're in a period of expansion right now, given the context of just how large range these candles are. So my thought here simply is this: if you were to first enter right here, you're probably going to have to deal with some sideways movement for a little while for price, because price action is probably going to start to digest this news. But I will note that this name it did break from this year-to-date VWAP. It pulled back and it's actually holding from that level right now. So, if you are really bullish these type of names and you're trying to level into various cannabis names, hey, I mean, this saw some volume on the way up. It pulled back to the year-to-date VWAP and it's kind of coming in. From a week-to-date perspective, I remember now. I do remember now. So look at the weekly chart. Over here, you can see kind of where the markings were, right? So do you notice how the 40-week, the 30-week, the 10-week, how it was starting to flatten out? This is when I was kind of talking about this, where you get these tightness, and then all of a sudden, this was like the first base of a markup phase. So this is kind of when it was on my radar. And you can kind of see these markings. And then as the 10-week was up, the 30-week, the 40-week, what did we do? We broke out, we consolidated, we broke out further, and we kind of just ran into this prior high, whatever that was. And then since that point, right, that right there would be more of a distribution stage. And now we're kind of still within the decline stage, possibly moving into an accumulation stage if this flattens out and starts doing what it did over here. But yeah, as you can, hopefully this is a kind of a better example of what I mean by like looking at a base building going into a markup phase where this thing kind of shot off. I don't know.
Fantastic. So did you trade this name, or this was just on your watch list?
I can't really remember. I may have entered into this for like a smaller trade, but I honestly, I'd have to go back in my history and actually check it out. I really can't remember. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So pivoting away from cannabis, a lot of my viewers, I interviewed the chart Dan from the Chart Guy, and he analyzed Aduro Clean Technologies, ADUR. And he was talking about if it breaks out, something's going to happen, and it did kind of break out. So I was wondering if you can pick it up from here and tell us what you see with this name.
So right out of the gate, right? So is this an IPO, right? Am I just not going back further enough?
They have this company has been public for quite a number of years.
Okay.
But it was trading on Canadian Securities Exchange, and
Gotcha.
in November of 2024, it uplisted to Nasdaq. So kind of like an IPO in the U.S., but it was already trading.
11.7. I'm just interested to see really quick before I talk about it. I'm going to go ahead and just go. Is that 2024? I think it said 11.7. What I'm doing right now is I'm just anchoring a volume price, a VWAP, to when we kind of opened up here in the American exchange. And I mean, this is pretty incredible. And I will say that this chart looks better already than the marijuana names in context if I were to just look at the charts. So I'm going to look at it just from the daily perspective. But if I did, like I said, apply to volume weighted average price here, do you notice how, right, we kind of were under it, then it kind of broke down. There was no real confirmation of breaking from the level fully. And then right in this area, we came back up to test it again, and price action got very, very tight, right? We saw some decent volume come in. And you see how this consolidation took place, and then volume got like almost invisible, right? That's volume drying up and that's price drying up. That's typically what we talked about earlier was when nobody's talking about the name, right? When very little people, but that's also where some of the best reward versus risk can kind of occur. So when I look at this now, let's talk in context now, what's it doing? Right now, I would consider this a period of consolidation because we ran up, and this would be, this is a big run up, right? Over 100%. Right? From the breakout, we're going from basically $5 to $11 to $12, right? And then now you're kind of dealing with more volatility, higher swings. So you might need to be prepared for 20 to 25% pullbacks in the name. But what I would say is watch to see how this consolidates, right? Right now we're putting in a series of higher lows. We're kind of running into this prior supply, big deal, no problem there. This would be a definitely tradable name, especially if we get some sideways movement and for these averages to kind of catch up. This could set up, and like I said, this is to not predict, but to plot out a potential path for what I would personally look for entering it into a swing trade. For an investment, if I look at this, right, and maybe they have the greatest technologies, maybe they're onto something very big, you can enter right now, and in 10 years, like, who cares if you waited for the consolidation at that point, right? Because if it comes down like this, I don't really care that much unless if I overweighted my portfolio, right? If I put 50% of everything I own in this name and it drops 10%, I'm going to be biting my fingernails a lot, right? My wife is going to be like, what are you doing? But if I put 5%, 2%, something like that, and I'm like, I'm just going to do for 2% and I'm going to hold it for 10, 20 years, that can turn into a huge, huge winner and make a big difference. While I'm looking at this now, yes, it's definitely probably getting the eyes of a lot of people, just given the context of the run up, the volume, and then the range of these candles. But I would be looking for the consolidation, seeing how that tightens up, and then just keeping an eye on it, because you're above these inclining averages. You're holding above a year-to-date VWAP and the IPO, I guess we'll say, right? When it launched on the American exchange. So yeah, overall, it's looking good.
Now, I don't know if this matters, but when the company uplisted to NASDAQ, obviously the volume improved quite a bit because there was very little volume on the Canadian Securities Exchange. But also what happened a few weeks ago, that the options chain opened for Aduro, where before there was no options.
Nice.
And yeah. I was wondering if the opening of options chain has any impact on the technicals, volume, or anything like that.
I think it'll definitely have an impact on volume. As far as the technicals go, I think right. So as far as the technicals go, in my opinion, I'm still focused in on the principles there. So strong stocks typically get stronger. So when I look at this from that perspective, we just hit a brand new high, right, from on this chart. So that's not a bearish thing, right? A new high is not bearish. So yeah, if it pulls back, like if you thought this was the high, right? Well, all-time high, it's going down forever. Well, you were wrong, right? We just broke it, right? If you thought this was the high, you were wrong. If you thought this was the high, well, you were wrong. So you'll go through periods of pullbacks and so forth. Then one of the other principles is stocks move between expansion and contraction. And this, I would say, is an expansionary move. I don't know how long it's going to expand, but I would be looking for the contraction. And then clearly from a volume perspective, you can see that there are pockets of strong volume. And then as far as your question about the options, I think that gives the ability to get different types of squeezes, right? You can get gamma squeezes and so forth. But then also what I really like about having options, which this isn't like it's weekly options, so it's probably a little bit more liquid. But with options, you have the ability to look at what the market is actually pricing in for risk, which is like one of my biggest advantages in this market. That's like one of the only forward-looking indicators, right? We're talking about technical analysis, but what we haven't mentioned is a lot of the quantitative analysis that I utilize within swing trading and so forth as well. And expected moves, especially in more liquid products, it lets you know what the market's pricing in as far as expectations go and as risk. So for example, like 4 days out, the market right now, which is crazy implied volatility, 162%, is pricing in about a $1.59 expected move, right? So $1.59, that would be considered one standard deviation that it can move within. So anything outside of that would be, hey, the market got this incorrect. I went on a tangent, my bad. Mm-hmm. But it is a very key element to what I do, and I think it's important to talk about expectations of markets. So.
Okay, but now, like at the end of the day, when people are interested in a stock or are looking at the chart, at the end of the day, they kind of want to know, well, am I going to make money? Where is this going? So what would you say to them by looking at this chart?
Right out of the gate, I would think that this can go higher just because it currently hit another high. So just based off of that simple analysis, yeah, it'll probably go higher. When that is and what it looks like after consolidation is what matters. So like I would not enter it right at this exact moment. I would like to see it consolidate or move up higher and then consolidate. So yeah, once again, higher highs, higher lows. That's bullish. I would say that this would be focused for a long-sided trade, not like a short-sided trade. And I would be very particular in my entries from a swing trading bucket, more specifically.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you for doing these analyses. My final question is, do you have any final thoughts? And also, where can people find you on social media if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, so I guess we kind of kept this really focused in on the technical side of things. I guess my final thought for people that are getting into technical analysis or understand it already is to really hone in on the principles of technical analysis and understand that it's a tool. Okay, it's not a way to predict where price is going to go. It's a tool to help you better manage risk, to find better entries. And then there's those different buckets, right? You have people that invest, people that swing trade, people that day trade. So there's context that's very important to the individual people that you listen to. And it's always important to ask for that specific context. Are you talking in terms of investing, swing trading, day trading, and then how they define it? If people want to find me, they can go to YouTube or just Google and just type in Figuring Out Money. I have a show there. I used to do it daily, but I've slowed down a little bit with my child, and another one on the way. But I post market briefs where I kind of dive into the S&P 500 expected moves, and then market conditions. One thing that we did not touch on, which is also a big element to the way that I approach markets, but understanding various market conditions I talk about frequently on the show.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This was fantastic.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.